Well, it didn't take the Browns very long to fire Joe Woods. They canned him pretty early this morning, which tends to lean to the organization kind of having their minds made up about this for quite some time now, just maybe not wanting to make that kind of monumental change in the middle of a season that's probably not going to go anywhere anyway, so might as well wait the season out. And now that it's over, pretty much as soon as they possibly could, they have fired Joe Woods. So the Browns defense has been a point of contention all season. I mean, not really contention as far as disagreement on whether it's good or bad, but contention as this Browns defense is really bad. Why is this guy still here? Kind of contention. Starting with secondary collapses, we saw them fall apart late in the Panthers game in the secondary. Fortunately, the Browns were able to come back in that one, but once again in the Jets game, an epic meltdown that did lead to that loss and kind of set a bad tone for the season going forward. And once the secondary allowing wide open guys stopped being kind of an issue, then the run defense became Swiss cheese, starting with the week against Atlanta when they had three of your four defensive linemen starters out. That might have been a given, but then we knew that that run defense wasn't a fluke when the Chargers, who were coming in with a really bad rushing attack, ran all over the Browns the very next week with most of those starters coming back. So even though the run defense was bad all year, while Clowney's defensive frustrations were the most public, I kind of covered it where, he's been kind of a malcontent all season with being frustrated with how the defense has been run, with how he's been deployed and all that. There's no way he was the only one who has hated playing under this defensive scheme. We saw Myles Garrett last year kind of hinting at towards some issues with the coaching staff and how things were being run. And you just have to know that, especially with some of the way the secondary was talking about each other early on in the season, once again with that Jets game where everybody was kind of nobody was essentially pointing the blame game, but they were deflecting blame from themselves, and just kind of spoke to a lack of cohesion, a lack of maybe a true leadership on this, especially on the defensive side of the football. And just in general, there's been not just defensive, but in general, there has been some leadership questions, but especially on the defensive side of the ball, it looked like there was hardly anybody to step up and be a leader, especially when Anthony Walker went down. So Joe Woods has gone away. It seems like his time with the Browns has been spent mostly with an underperforming defense. You could argue the first season he was here that the defense was dealing with some injury issues, especially in the secondary. The second year it started out really bad, but the second half they played like a real top 5 unit. Maybe that would carry into this year, but however, that was not the case. It started pretty rough, and it didn't really get too much better. They had a couple solid outings, but those were definitely the exception rather than the norm. So the Browns have already requested to interview some potential replacements. Jared Mayo, who is currently a linebacker coach for the Patriots, he also played for them for a long time, obviously. Brian Flores, also a linebacker coach currently for the Pittsburgh Steelers, although he's probably most notably known for being the former head coach of the Miami Dolphins. And I think his lawsuit against the NFL is still, and the Dolphins maybe, he has some lawsuit against the NFL still going. I'm not sure how they'll navigate that if he ends up being the hire. And they've also asked to interview Sean Desai, whichever, I know I'm butchering his last name, but I know his first name's Sean, so there's that, who is currently an associate head coach for defense for Seattle. And the Seahawks are in the playoffs, so I'm guessing they'll have to wait for them to be out of that playoffs in order to officially interview him and ask for that, but maybe not. I forget how that kind of works, but either way, I think he is probably not their top pick, but who knows. I feel like any of these options that I just named that the Browns have officially requested to interview have to be some level of an upgrade at some sort. I mean, even if they come in and the defense still stinks, at least there's going to be a new face for the defense that stinks. And if they're even any better than pretty bad, then they should be, there should be an upgrade moving forward. I feel like the Browns do have some enticing pieces for a new defensive coordinator to come in and work with, such as, Myles Garrett, obviously, although that interior defensive line is definitely a project that they're going to have to work on in the offseason. Guys like Owusu Koromoa probably can get some creative juices flowing. Anthony Walker should be coming back, and hopefully that will that will look like a nice piece for a defensive coordinator. And the secondary, again, you figure they have some nice pieces. We've seen Grant Delpit improve vastly over the last half of this season. Maybe he gets some momentum going. We all know about Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome, and Martin Emerson had a really good rookie campaign. John Johnson is probably, he had a really rough season. I'm not sure about his contract length, but again, John Johnson didn't have a good year for the Browns, quite frankly. If he was good, it was definitely in flashes and not very consistent. But we've seen John Johnson be better than this before, but maybe not necessarily that consistently in a Browns uniform, unfortunately. But there should be enough pieces at every level to at least get a defensive coordinator as a nice idea to come coach, especially if they're sold on a bill of goods, maybe that they're going to actually try to fix the interior defensive line and not go with the ragtag group that we saw this year, that we saw in the run defense that was heavily. They were bombshelled against the run game. And, Joe Woods, while I didn't think he was a good coach, with that kind of interior defensive line and the linebacker core that got decimated throughout the season with injuries, there's only so much you can do against the run game. But it's going to be a puzzle either way, figuring out who the defensive coordinator is going to be, who they're going to get for help as far as interior defensive line help. Maybe want some more linebackers to shore up the depth a little bit. You can always use some more cornerback depth, in my opinion, but it'll be interesting to see how they approach that moving forward. But I am glad that the Browns got Joe Woods firing out of the way early. Although they might fire another one with Mike Priefer, they were pretty non-committal to him. But reportedly, the Browns aren't planning on making any other major coaching changes at the coordinator level. Obviously, with Joe Woods getting canned, that means pretty much every defensive position coach is probably on the hot seat right now as far as the new defensive coordinator coming in and getting his own guys at the position coaches. But right now, as far as coordinator and above, it doesn't seem like they're going to make any monumental changes. Although, again, Mike Priefer definitely not getting the, a solid like he's definitely going to be here. They look like they might be exploring some options as special teams coach where they become available. But again, this is all speculation and conjecture at this point. I just want to go over guys who the Browns have actually specifically asked to request for an interview. I don't want to get into rumors like maybe they go after Vic Fangio, even though he seems pretty attached to the hip of Sean Payton. I feel like that's something that's kind of a bit conjecture at this point. So that's pretty much it for this video. As I'm glad Joe Woods is gone. I will see you at the next one.